10 minutes. 10 minutes is the only thing that separated my birth from my twin sister's birth. The process of delivering twins is an interesting phenomenon. It adds a touch of irrational judgment in a field so dependent on reason-based thinking. Doctors just sort of have to roll with whomever comes out first. Not all that much thought goes into the decision. For my circumstances, I was chosen second, after my sister Margot. Now, I know what you may be thinking. So what? You were born after your twin, it doesn't really matter. Well, in most cases it wouldn't matter, but for me this choice, if you would even call it one, made my birth a near-death experience that caused concerns that there would be developmental issues for me in the future. The experience left me weak to the point where I could not run or jump nearly as well as Margot in my early youth. Doctors told my parents that I would likely not have the same life as my twin, my supposed equal. Just like that, it seemed that the 10 minutes that Margot was in this world longer than me were already beginning to differentiate the two of us. That small amount of time took me on a different path than hers and molded me into who I am today. It seems that in life, the first few minutes make all of the difference. We as humans have a natural tendency to take in information and immediately attempt to come up with conclusions. It's the time at the beginning we base everything off of. Our instincts hold on to initial impressions and never let them go. It's in many ways a survival mechanism we can't seem to shake off. We are inherently uncomfortable with the unknown and seek immediate answers. When observing people for the first time, I especially have fallen into this trap. After just a few minutes, I often put people into categories as a means of organizing information. It's just the easy thing to do. But the reality of the situation is that people are complicated beings that take time to get to know entirely. Gilman is a miraculous place because we all seem to contribute to the community in our own way, with different skills and talents. But our time is valuable, so we rarely spend it on getting to know each other. Just minutes of interaction, and we think we can predict what a person is all about, what they stand for, and where they're from. When someone steps out of a common misperception of him or herself, he or she is the one who is seemingly at fault, being called strange or out of the ordinary. We all have our own stories of being put into categories by people who haven't gotten to know us. Today I'd like to share two categories that I've been struggling with. So for me, ever since I entered Gilman in the 6th grade, I was undoubtedly under the shadow of my older brother, John. Teachers called me John all the time throughout the middle school. John was such a presence everywhere he went that even teachers who didn't have him as a student made that mistake. I knew that in the back of my head, these teachers were just sort of old and were bad with names, but it still imposed a feeling on me that I, myself, did not have an identity, and that no matter the circumstances, I would be defined by my brother and his legacy. If there was one thing that separated us, however, it was John's white hair. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, my brother has a large streak of white hair across his forehead. It's natural, by the way. He didn't dye it in some fit of Gothic rage. I still remember when, one day, as my family and I were walking out of Staples, a mysterious old man pointed to my brother and remarked something along the lines of, "That child has been touched by God," going as far as to call him the Messiah, among other things. Sure, that man was probably a little out of his mind, but at the time, he said what I thought others were thinking. My brother was the claimed chosen one, the gifted child, the leader of the generation, and I was just his brother. It seemed that my brother was perfect in everything he did, and this put an unreasonable expectation on me, that not meeting his standards meant that I could have done better. Because my brother was the model of success, many of my choices have been made for me, from something as trivial as being forced to wear his old hand-me-downs to something as life-changing as going to this school in the first place. Ultimately, when people would ask me why I don't have white hair like my brother, I would shake the comment off. On the inside, however, I knew that it was because any time I saw white hair on my own head, I would take it out to distinguish the two of us as much as possible. As I entered high school and grew older, I began to realize that there was some level of maturity with understanding that my brother and I were tied together for life, and that we'd end up being somewhat similar no matter what I tried to do. In coming to terms with this, a whole different challenge arose. It became very easy for me to become dependent on my brother's successes, almost completely opposite of what I endured as a middle schooler. I was happily enveloped by his identity. I would find myself only being able to contribute to a conversation by saying, "Oh, my brother told me this," as it seemed cool to be able to have the older view on things. So, in a sense, I was right back where I started. I was not really getting a grasp of who I was. The only difference this time was that being categorized as a mini John sort of became positive, something I could use to my advantage. But it wasn't allowing me to grow and experience my own life independently. I'm still very much struggling with this right now. If there's one thing you take from my experiences, it'd be that a mold, whether it be positive or negative, is still a constraint on development. We are all different people and thus must be treated as so. Besides the questions of if I'm John's brother, I frequently get asked what ethnicity I am. For me, it's never been a clear-cut answer. I consider myself biracial, but it's really just one big mix of Japanese, Armenian, Italian, Dutch, Irish, and Native American blood. If you don't know where Armenia is, it's where the Kardashians are from. Anyways, it seems that race is one of the easiest tools to categorize people with. Because someone is of a particular ethnicity, we feel we already know what his or her lifestyle is like. Even when we don't know their race, we have already formed a perception of who they are just based on what they look like. It'd be impossible to guess my ethnicity based on just looking at me or even by spending 10 minutes with me. Many have guessed and few have prevailed. The guesses I've gotten range from Chinese to Mexican to Filipino to Indian. The idea of being more than just one race rarely crosses people's minds. In this same light, I've encountered a lot of paperwork over the years asking for my ethnicity, but only allowing me to check one box. I always think to myself, how can I choose between white and Asian? That'd be like asking me to choose which parent I like more. So I end up checking off the box marked other instead. This again just speaks to people's desire for a clean-cut category, but it often leaves those of us who don't exactly fit in one with a sense of not belonging. I still remember attending one of those middle school parent-student dialogue nights with my dad, who was white. It was one of those things where you and your parent were separated and were put into randomized groups with other students and their parents. Nothing notable happened that night, but the next day at school, a classmate came up to me and remarked, "Brian, I didn't know you were adopted." I was astonished by this comment, enough so that I'm putting it in my senior speech. This is just one of the many instances where someone assumed your lifestyle, how you live, what you do, without sitting down and truly getting to know you. We give people none of our precious time, not even 10 minutes, before we make a snap judgment. This happens with every race and undoubtedly has caused problems in our society. The one piece of advice I hope you can take out of my speech, and something I wish I had learned a little earlier in high school, is that you should reconsider what you know about people. Have you given them more than 10 minutes before you've judged them? What experiences have let you make conclusions about the person next to you? In a world where we know things instantaneously through the internet, I urge you all to be comfortable with the fact that you know nothing about the majority of people. The great Greek philosopher Socrates once said, "True knowledge exists in knowing that you know nothing." Mr. Smythe, Mr. Hubeck, faculty, students, family, as my approximately 10-minute speech comes to a close, remember how initial impressions can alter perceptions for a lifetime. Thank you.